Did you ask Merrick Garland that the last 4 years? Did you talk about Epstein?
I am reclaiming my
the
time.
last
I'm glad
4
you're
years?
asking about Merrick Garland.
You don't get to reclaim
because
time
this
when
is
you don't-
bigger than
when
Watergate.
when I don't answer a question the way you
goes
want.
over 4 administrations. You don't have to go back to Biden. Let's go back to Obama. Let's go back to George Bush. This cover-up spans decades, and you are responsible for this portion of it.
And that's
now,
where the
I want to know, at what point did the FBI and the DOJ decide that Lex Wessner was not a co-conspirator? Because our Epstein Files Transparency Act requires you, please put it back on the screen, please, to release the internal decision about whether to prosecute him or not, and it's not in the files, and it's not in the files for any of these other men.
Pam Bondi may have thought she found a way to dodge accountability, but her latest appearance only created even more questions. After being called before Congress over the handling of the Epstein files, Bondi avoided answering directly and instead had a Department of Justice attorney respond to many of the questions aimed at her. Even more striking, she repeatedly tried to distance herself from responsibility by pointing toward current Attorney General Todd Blanch. Her message was simple: blame the current DOJ, not her. But critics aren't buying it. The controversy comes at a moment when multiple ethics complaints are already hanging over both Bondi and Blanch, and now legal watchdogs are asking whether either attorney should continue practicing law at all. What started as a debate over document releases is turning into something much bigger, a fight over professional misconduct, legal ethics, and whether 2 of Trump's most high-profile legal allies crossed lines that attorneys are never supposed to cross. And the more Bondi pushes responsibility onto someone else, the more attention she's drawing to the growing list of complaints already surrounding her own conduct.
So you say she could be brought back. As I'm sure you now know, she's now facing an ethics complaint brought to the Florida bar by a coalition of legal groups, including a former Florida Supreme Court justice. They accuse her of coercing DOJ lawyers into unethical acts, pursuing cases without probable cause, and the mishandling of the release of the sensitive Epstein victims' records. Could that open up new lines of questioning for her?
Absolutely. Look, Pam Bondi is no longer the AG, but certainly she was at the center of an enormous amount of weaponization and corruption at the Department of Justice. I mean, the way that Donald Trump essentially made that department his own personal team of lawyers, the way that he went after and continues to go after his political enemies, the way that he has used the legal system to go after folks that he feels has wronged him or wronged his family and friends. And Pam Bondi has been completely complicit in all of that.
For months, Bondi benefited from a legal shield that made it difficult for ethics complaints against her to move forward in Florida. Because she served as a federal official, state disciplinary authorities faced restrictions that effectively stalled several investigations. But that protection is no longer as reliable as it once was. At the same time, the Department of Justice attempted to introduce a policy that would have dramatically changed how complaints against DOJ lawyers are handled. Under that proposal, state bar associations would have been unable to pursue ethics investigations unless the Justice Department itself approved them first. Critics immediately saw a major problem. If the DOJ gets to decide whether complaints against its own lawyers can proceed, who exactly is providing independent oversight? That question sparked fierce opposition from legal organizations across the country. While Bondi may have hoped institutional protections would slow down the scrutiny, the controversy only intensified. Instead of making the complaints disappear, the proposal fueled accusations that powerful officials were trying to build a system that protects themselves from the same disciplinary process every other lawyer faces.
Pam Bondi has a lot to answer for. Why are only 50% of the files released? Why were the names of survivors, as we know, doxxed and really put in danger? Many of them were put in danger during this process. Why still has there been no real information about the president's name, which was put in and then removed, and files were moved around? There's so many questions for the Attorney General. And this idea that Republicans don't want to release the interview as an actual video to the public, which they of course have done on all these other interviews recently, is crazy. And it really leads to this idea of a massive coordinated cover-up.
During congressional questioning, Representative Robert Garcia zeroed in on what many observers saw as Bondi's central strategy, shifting responsibility onto Todd Blanch. Garcia argued that Bondi repeatedly suggested the current Attorney General was responsible for decisions involving the Epstein file review, including redactions, disclosures, and other controversial actions that have generated public outrage. But Garcia wasn't finished. He also pressed Bondi about President Trump and whether any conversations took place regarding the handling of the files. According to Garcia, Bondi refused to answer questions connected to Trump, declining to discuss what the president knew, what he requested, or whether he played any role in decisions surrounding the documents. For critics, those refusals only deepened suspicions. The Epstein Transparency Act imposed legal obligations on the Department of Justice, and Bondi was leading the department during key periods in question. Whether she wants to point toward Blanch or not, opponents argue that ultimate responsibility rested with her office, and that argument is now becoming a central theme in the ethics complaints piling up against both attorneys.
Well, 2 seats down, yes, 2 seats down. And I am not going to discuss any conversations I've had or not have with the President of the United States.
Because the American public is entitled to know, Madam Attorney General.
The entire cabinet was at that dinner.
Whether you took instructions from President Trump after he told you very directly to indict James Comey, which is weaponization of the Department of Justice.
Her refusal to answer legitimate questions and, if anything, to seem to make a mockery of the setting and the body itself, and to refuse to address those questions regarding ongoing controversies at the Department of Justice wasn't just focused on the Comey prosecution. It extended to the latest reporting on Donald Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, and allegations that he accepted $50,000 in cash from undercover FBI agents last year.
The Epstein controversy is only one piece of a much larger problem. Ethics complaints filed against Bondi extend beyond document handling and into broader accusations involving the conduct of the Justice Department itself. Critics point to allegations that DOJ attorneys violated court orders repeatedly under her leadership. Others cite investigations involving prosecutions that opponents describe as politically motivated and aimed at individuals seen as enemies of Donald Trump. Names such as Letitia James and James Comey continue to appear in discussions surrounding those complaints. Whether those allegations ultimately succeed remains to be seen, but the volume of accusations has become impossible to ignore. What makes the situation especially significant is the role Bondi occupied. As Attorney General, she wasn't just another lawyer in the system. She was the person responsible for enforcing standards throughout the department. That is why critics argue the expectations should be even higher. When the nation's top law enforcement official faces questions about professional responsibility, the issue extends far beyond one individual and reaches directly into public trust in the legal system itself. While Bondi faces mounting pressure, Todd Blanch is dealing with a growing list of controversies of his own. Critics argue that his actions often raise questions about whether he is serving the American public or continuing to operate as Donald Trump's personal attorney. One of the most controversial examples involves the settlement of Trump's lawsuit against the IRS. Opponents claim Blanch helped facilitate a massive settlement arrangement without pursuing the kind of legal motions many attorneys would typically file first. Critics have described the situation as a potential abuse of legal procedure and even suggested it could amount to malpractice. The controversy has fueled calls for additional ethics investigations, with some legal observers arguing that the arrangement appeared designed to avoid normal judicial scrutiny. Whether those accusations ultimately hold up remains uncertain, but the political fallout has been significant, and as more details emerge, pressure continues building on Blanch from both watchdog organizations and members of the legal community who believe his conduct deserves closer examination. Unlike Bondi's situation in Florida, Todd Blanch faces a very different reality in New York, where he holds his law license, and the state's legal establishment is making its position crystal clear. After the Justice Department proposed limiting ethics investigations against DOJ attorneys, the New York State Bar Association fired back with a sharply worded response. The organization argued that state bars have a legal responsibility to investigate complaints involving attorneys licensed in their jurisdictions, regardless of whether those lawyers work for the federal government. Even more importantly, the association warned that allowing the DOJ to control disciplinary reviews would politicize the process rather than protect it. The letter essentially rejected the idea that powerful government lawyers should receive special treatment. According to the Bar Association, attorneys who misrepresent facts, violate ethical duties, or abuse their authority should face the same scrutiny as everyone else. For Blanch, that means the complaints filed against him are unlikely to disappear quietly. In fact, New York's legal community appears increasingly determined to make sure they are fully examined. For many legal observers, the larger issue goes far beyond Pam Bondi or Todd Blanch. The legal profession depends on public confidence that attorneys are accountable to the same ethical standards, regardless of their political connections or job titles. That is why disciplinary systems exist in the first place. They are designed to investigate allegations, determine whether misconduct occurred, and impose consequences when necessary. Critics argue that creating special protections for politically connected government lawyers would undermine that entire framework. Supporters of investigations insist that simply being investigated does not mean someone is guilty. It means the facts deserve examination. But removing the ability to investigate altogether is what many bar associations appear unwilling to accept. The debate has also revived memories of Trump's first administration, when several attorneys associated with election-related litigation faced serious professional consequences. Lawyers such as Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, and John Eastman became examples frequently cited by those who argue that bar associations are willing to act when they believe ethical lines have been crossed. Supporters of accountability point to those cases as proof that disciplinary systems can operate independently of politics. Critics of Bondi and Blanch now argue the same standards should apply here. Their position is straightforward. If lawyers in prior controversies faced investigations and sanctions, then current DOJ officials should not be exempt from similar scrutiny simply because they occupy powerful positions. Meanwhile, additional complaints continue to emerge around Blanch's conduct. Critics have questioned his involvement in crypto-related matters, arguing he should have recused himself because of financial interests. Others have raised concerns regarding high-profile immigration and prosecution decisions that have generated legal challenges and accusations of vindictive enforcement. Whether those complaints gain traction remains to be seen, but they add to an already expanding list of issues attracting attention from watchdog groups and legal organizations. Taken together, the allegations paint a picture of two officials facing increasing pressure from multiple directions at once, with ethics investigations becoming a growing focal point of the controversy. At this point, the real question isn't whether criticism of Pam Bondi and Todd Blanch will continue. It's whether the institutions responsible for policing attorney conduct decide to take action. The complaints are already on the table, the pressure is building, and bar associations are signaling they have no intention of surrendering their oversight authority. Whether that ultimately leads to investigations, disciplinary action, or something even more serious remains to be seen. But one thing is clear. This story is no longer just about the Epstein files. It's become a larger battle over accountability, ethics, and whether some of the most powerful lawyers in Washington will be held to the same standards as everyone else. If you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for the next update.